Let's play word association. What's the first thought that comes to mind when I say search engine optimization? Let me guess. Is it frustration? Waste of time and money? Pain? Do you get a sick feeling in the pit of your stomach at the mention of this geeky acronym? Well, however you feel about SEO, it's critical to your website's and business's success. And today, I have all your SEO questions answered by one of the world's leading experts on this very dark art. It's the award-winning Small Business Big Marketing Show, thanks to American Express.
Yeah, I said, welcome to a Small Business Marketing Show, where successful small business owners share their souls to take your marketing straight to the lead. Now, here's your host, Mr. Timbo Reid.
And welcome back to your weekly dose of marketing skullduggery. I'm your host, Timbo Reid. You, infinitely more importantly, you're a motivated business owner. And you're ready to crank out some great marketing to build that beautiful business of yours into the empire it absolutely deserves to be. Today's 438th episode is made possible thanks to American Express. And to see how your business expenses can absolutely reward you, I suggest after this episode's over, Googling Amex Business. Big show today. And I mean really big. No jingle of the week. No monster prize draw, just a solid episode of SEO tips and tricks from one of the world's best, ensuring your website gets found in 2019 and beyond. As per usual, team, there is marketing GOLD dripping from the ceiling over here at Small Business Big Marketing's HQ. So let's get stuck right in. Now, let me guess, if you're like most small business owners, you've spent plenty of time and plenty of money on getting your website live. There was probably tears involved, pulling out of hair, and just sheer frustration, really, as you found someone to design it, build it, populate it with words, pictures, audio, video that you had to create, and then finally you screamed at your webmaster, "I can't do it anymore! Just hit the big green button and send it live." At that point, you have heaved a huge sigh of relief, knowing your work there was done and you could get on with much more pressing business matters like, attracting great people, calling in outstanding debt, deciding which coffee machine to buy for the staff cafeteria. But here's the thing. Whilst having a website is important for any business, getting it live is really just the start of an ongoing process. You see, your website's a needle in a haystack, a gigantic haystack called the internet. And your next and ongoing challenge is to ensure it gets found by the right people who are ready to buy. And that's where SEO, aka search engine optimization, steps in. It's a dark art for most small business owners who either don't understand it, are frustrated by it, have spent money hand over fist trying to get it right and have others implement it for them, or all of the above. Well, I'm putting a stop to that right here, right now. Get your SEO right and your website can all of a sudden become an inquiry-generating, money-making machine. We love that. And who better to help us do that than Dana DiTomaso, who I was kindly introduced to by past guest and SEO legend, you know I don't use that word very often, Rand Fishkin, who was the founder of Moz, one of the world's leading SEO agencies. Now, with Rand no longer operating in the SEO space, he's moved on. Moz is still about. I emailed him a few weeks ago asking who I should chat to get an update on SEO tactics for small business owners as we head into 2019. And his immediate response was Dana, who is a partner of the Canadian-based digital agency called KickPoint. Now, I've got to tell you, when Rand Fishkin recommends someone, there really is no need to look elsewhere. So I emailed Dana asking her to appear on the show, and she immediately came back with a, "Hell yeah!" like those. And I then sent a simple email out to my list asking you, my precious listeners, for your most pressing SEO questions. And boy, oh boy, was I absolutely inundated. So thanks for your responses. Your questions have formed the basis of this and next week's episodes. I started off by asking Dana to explain what SEO is and what it isn't.
Well, it's probably easier to start with what it is not, because SEO over the years, I've been working in this field for 18 years now, SEO has really grown from being really specific technical and content changes you make to a website so you improve your rankings into Google, and now it is everything. It encompasses so many different aspects of online marketing. What it is not is magic. And I think that that is something that a lot of SEO companies might pretend that there's some sort of, magic fairy dust that gets sprinkled on your website and suddenly you're ranking better. But it's not. It's a lot of best practices, smart technical know-how, and great content, and then telling people about that content. And all of that encompasses search engine optimization.
And at the end of the day, it's all about ranking well on search engines. Is it fair to say...
Ranking well and getting people to click on your rankings. This is the other part of it too, is you can rank number one, but if nobody wants to click on your listing, who cares?
Yes, good point. A very good point. Is it fair to say that we talk about Google, that's the big daddy of them all. When we say search engine optimization, and I'm sort of representing Australian business owners here, although I have listeners from all over the world, do we need to worry about Bing or any other search engines?
Bing can be important. It does vary country by country, the percentage of people who use Bing, and even other search engines like DuckDuckGo, for example. But what I find is the stuff that works for Google typically works for Bing. And really, actually, one great way to tell if you've got a Google penalty is to look at your Google traffic versus your Bing traffic. If they both drop, then you've done something technically wrong. If only Google drops, then you've done something to anger Google.
Do all these other search engines like DuckDuckGo and like Bing, are they starting from scratch and building it from the ground up, or are they actually utilising what Google's created and sort of white labelling it?
They're definitely starting from the ground up. But Yahoo, for example, that is a Google search partner. So that is Google search at that point.
Okay. So we'll worry about Google. Now, the other question I have, because I've got a lot of listener questions, Dana, is SEO completely pointless if your website is poorly designed and populated?
Yep. Honestly, why would we spend money to push people to your website if it sucks? Work on that first. And often the things that will make your website better are better from an SEO perspective anyway. It's the stuff we would have to fix. So clean up your house before you invite people in.
So to that point, hopefully everyone with a crook website hasn't turned off. There is no need to turn off, because I'm guessing the kind of knowledge that you're going to share during our chat today you can listen to in the context of, well, how do I fix my current website in order for it to be valuable when someone clicks on it?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing. Before I, again, get into listener questions, can you explain how Google works?
Well, Google will tell you that it's, magic, but essentially the way Google works is they have search engine robot spiders that go out and crawl the internet. And what they're looking for is they'll take a link from one site and look at another site, and then they'll check out that site and they'll do an initial index. And so they'll review all the pages, and then they'll decide where should this page go. And it used to be that when you did a Google search, there was a specific set of rankings that came up, and they changed fairly infrequently, and then they changed all the time. And so you and I could Google exactly the same thing, but because we're in two very different locations, we're probably going to get two very different sets of results. And definitely your past search behavior also influences this. So really what Google's trying to do is answer your query with the right type of search result. So it isn't just, the 10 blue links, traditional search engine stuff that we see. If it's a local result, if you're looking for, plumbers near me, you're going to see maps. If you're researching, say, should I get vinyl plank or should I get, some other type of flooring for my house, then you're going to see a bunch of different types of results with those types of comparisons. It really depends on what that query is. And so what Google's really trying to understand is what is the best result. And that's truly how Google works, is trying to take the meat of the internet and then show it to people in a way that answers their question. It may not be the best way for us, particularly in that Google is taking a lot of things from people's websites and presenting it on Google without encouraging people to click through to your website. And local search is a great example of that. For example, if you're on mobile and you do something like search for a restaurant, you might not even see a link to get to the restaurant's website as just call or make a reservation right on Google without actually having to go to the restaurant's website, which is fine because a lot of restaurant websites are terrible. But that's part of Google, keeping people on Google, because they know that people's websites suck, particularly on mobile. So what can Google do to keep you on there and present the result in a way that's good? Maybe not from a marketer perspective, but from a Google perspective.
How do we stay up to speed on what Google wants?
That is a ongoing question. There's a few great industry blogs out there for sure. Search Engine Land, for example, is one good one. There's Moz in the US, M-O-Z or Z, depending upon how you say that letter, .com, and they have a fantastic blog as well. And a little self-plug here, we have our own newsletter, which we send out weekly on Fridays. It'd be Saturday for those of you in Australia. And you can go to kickpoint.ca/newsletter to sign up for that. And we try to summarize what's happening in the field every week, because there is a ton of changes that go on in our industry on a day-to-day basis. I took a vacation for 2 weeks once, and I had a whole folder of reading to catch up on when I got back. So it's not for the faint of heart to keep up, but as long as you know the major things that are happening, you can keep up yourself as well.
So, Dana, and it's reflective of the questions that we've received for this episode. And, I speak at a lot of conferences and I see the pain in the eyes of small business owners when you talk about SEO. Mm-hmm. Google's a monster. It's complicated. It's got this algorithm that, even the best SEO experts like yourself sometimes probably go cross-eyed over and go, how do we keep up? Talk about just the mindset. What mindset should a small business owner have, a vet, a plumber, a masseur, who's like, I know SEO is important. Do they just give up knowing that there are all these much bigger companies out there who have a lot more knowledge and a lot deeper pockets?
I honestly think that big companies are actually at a bit of a disadvantage, particularly if it's a place where there's a location that people can come visit. Because big brands, and we've worked with some big brands with lots of locations around the country, they are really terrible sometimes. Some of them are quite good, but some of them are really bad at search engine optimization at a local scale. And so if you have a small business and you serve your locality, you actually have a big advantage because you can talk about your location and you can show people that you're involved in your community. And that goes a long way with Google because in addition to Google's algorithm doing its computer stuff to look at your site and evaluating it, against those different factors, there's also human beings employed by Google. These are called search quality raters who go out and check out websites. And what they look for are three factors: experience, authority, and trust. And experience is showing that you know what you're doing. Authority means that people have talked to you. For example, you've been on a podcast.
Hey.
Talking about something like that. This is granting authority right now. And trust is reviews, people saying good things about you, that you're a real business that people can turn to and you're not just a locksmith who's a fly-by-night operation, for example. So having those kinds of factors for a local business are really key, and it's something that local businesses are really bad at talking about themselves. They feel like they don't want to brag, they don't want to go out there and promote themselves. But in reality, you're really involved in your community and you should talk more about that. So a lot of the work that we do with local businesses is encouraging them to do things like sponsor a soccer team, for example, and talk about that on your website. Blog about, we have a physiotherapist here in Canada, and whenever there's a marathon in his town, we ask him to write about the marathon because sometimes the marathon website sucks. And that means that he is providing the authority for that marathon. And then people will link to him as opposed to the marathon website. He has things about running trails in his area. So think about you as a business and what you can do to provide people information about your location. You're in that area. Your business is part of that community. So how can you write about that community in a way that conveys that experience, that authority, and that trust?
Great advice right there. And, amazing how many small business owners don't want to talk about themselves. But just using you as an example of saying yes to coming on this podcast, albeit, recommendation from Rand Fishkin, fantastic. But for you, just transparently, what is it about appearing on a podcast that gives you that it adds to your authority and was appealing for you to come on here?
Yeah, so for me, it's, you're going to link to our website, so that's great. And that's always, link is always good. Someone else may hear the podcast and call us for, business, and so that's always nice. And then the other thing too is other people who run podcasts will also hear this podcast and will also contact me to get them on their podcast. So
Correct.
it is definitely a recurring thing that happens. And honestly, this kind of authority is huge. I also do a recurring technology column for the radio station here in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, CBC Edmonton AM, and CBC is like BBC, it's across the country. And having that column and having a link from the CBC immediately grants our business a lot of authority. And so this is just adding to it and showing that we're an authority not just in Canada, but internationally. And so when we get calls from people in Australia, in the United States, who want to have me on their show or on their conference, that shows that we don't just serve the Edmonton market, but we work with companies around the world. And that's really important for us as part of our marketing strategies to demonstrate that experience worldwide, not just in a Canadian context.
Dana, one thing I want to do, the last thing I want to do before we get on to all these questions is hear your tips on SEO. And what I understand is that you are all about ensuring the basics are handled right before you worry about any fancy stuff. So what are your sort of top 5 things that all small business owners should do from an SEO perspective?
Yeah, one of the basics is title tags. And so this is when you Google and the blue text that comes up that you can tap is the title of your website. And you can see it when you've got your website open in a browser. It's the name of the tab itself. Title tags are really important, and a lot of people will put their business name first in the title tag. You're going to rank for your business name. Do not worry about that. Your title tag should encompass what you do. Don't spam it full of keywords, but make sure it's got some information in there that's useful for people. Explain what you do. Make it interesting. Make it funny if you're funny, but make sure it's got those keywords in there. And I think that a lot of people have home as their title tag. That's useless, unless you're selling homes. That would be the only way it would be okay.
Even then, it'd be quite useleless, but it'd be something.
Exactly.
How many characters do you have?
It's actually a number of pixels. It isn't characters.
Yes, it is.
So Moz has a great title tag testing tool, so you can type in what you want, and it'll tell you whether or not it fits.
Right. But is it around 60 to 70 characters?
70-ish. Yeah, I would say when you get around the 68 character mark, think about if you want to cut it back a little bit. But definitely try to write the most important stuff at the beginning. And I find particularly for local businesses, we find it's useful to have the postcode in the title tag as well. But you can toss that at the end, even if it gets truncated and you see the little 3 ... dots on Google, it's fine because Google is still reading it and it would count from a ranking perspective.
Does it need to, so therefore adding that at the end, so does your title tag need to make sense? Does it need to be like a headline, or can it just be It does. Okay.
Yeah, it does. And if you're running any Google ads, we find taking your best performing headline from Google ads and making that your title tag can actually provide you a nice boost in number of people who click on your result.
Nice. Okay, next basic SEO tip.
Please have content on your website. A lot of people don't.
What do you
like writing,
mean?
and I get that. Yeah, writing is hard. I totally understand. I'm not a huge fan of writing either, but you have to do it, and you have to talk about what you do, and make sure that you're explaining to people what you do in really plain, simple language. That's what Google wants. Try to write at about a grade 10 level. There's a good app called Hemingway that will evaluate your writing and say how complicated you are. And hire a copywriter and just sit down with them. Honestly, our best clients who end up hiring copywriters, we tell them, just sit down with the copywriter for half an hour and explain to them what you do as if they're buying your service. And they will write all that down and they will turn it into fantastic copy. And you are probably really bad at explaining what you do unless you do it regularly. So this is also part of practice that will help you in sales, in addition to having better website content. So get that content out there.
There are many websites like Design Crowd and 99 Designs that make it easy to find designers. Do you have a reference for finding a copywriter?
I don't. I would say shop local.
Yes.
That's always good. And try to find somebody, get samples of their writing. A lot of the writers we work with have written for magazines, for example. They get how to communicate complex things in a really simple way.
Yeah, great point. Great point. Okay, next tip.
I find images are also really important. Please don't do stock photography if you can at all avoid it. I know from an SEO perspective, you may think, well, what does it matter? But again, this relates to people seeing you. And if you have a local business, and that means that you're going to come up in map-based searches. So if somebody Googles plumber and you see a map, they're going to click on your listing, and photos are really important in that listing. So spend the money, spend a half day with a professional photographer, get some photos taken of you doing your thing wherever you happen to do it. It shouldn't take more than a half day, and really in Canada, that costs less than $500. In Australia, your rates are going to vary based on where you are and how many photographers there are desperate for work in your area. But definitely spend that half day and make that happen. Having personalized photos that show you, particularly if you're in the kind of business where you're going into someone's home to do the work, it makes a huge difference if they can see who the person is before they pick up the phone and call.
Is that a good for Google? Are they able to see images, or is it really just?
They like it if you upload those images to your Google My Business listing. So it is really important from a local SEO perspective, particularly.
What about title tags on images? How important are they?
They matter if you're down to, I have optimized absolutely everything and I am out of ideas. So that's the last thing you do. It's not the first thing you do.
Okay. Any other tips before we get into the questions?
Yeah, if you have a local business as well, we do a lot of local-based search engine optimization. And what's working really well right now are Google posts. And those are posts that you make directly to your Google My Business page. They show up on what's called a knowledge panel, which is that big swath of information about your business on the right-hand side when you Google your brand name. Make sure to post those at least once a week. They disappear after 7 days. We found that clients who do that and literally nothing else are seeing good gains in local SEO right now. Totally worth doing.
So I always worry about that. Well, not so much worry's such a big word, but when you go and create content for, say, a LinkedIn article, and now you're saying a Google post, and Facebook have, I think they're called notes, you know, you're sort of giving your content away to a third party. Why aren't you better to just put that on your blog? Or can you do both?
You can do both. And in fact, the posts are very short. So usually when you post a blog post, make sure to make a Google post about the blog post.
Right. So not cut and paste, but maybe a summary of a greater blog post that's sitting on your own website.
Yeah, similar to what you would make as a tweet or a LinkedIn post.
Great. Okay, Google posts on Google My Business. I know there's a couple of questions about Google My Business later, but that's a great tip. You're pretty big on load times too, aren't you, Dana?
Yeah, load times are always huge. And I find, honestly, for small businesses, you'll end up in a situation where you say you have a WordPress website and you bought a template, and those templates are trying to do everything for everyone, so they have really poor load times.
Yes.
Try to work with a professional developer if you can. And Google also has a free site speed tool that can show you where the issues are. It is worthwhile to pay a developer some of their time to make your website faster. And some of our very small business clients, we put them on Squarespace. Their sites load fast. You don't have to pay to get WordPress updated all the time. You don't have to worry about code or hackers or anything like that. It's pretty inexpensive, and the sites look great. So I'd recommend looking into Squarespace as well if you can't be bothered with WordPress or don't have a web developer handy.
Just in regards to load times and some of the other tips you've talked about, and going back to mindset, is it fair to say that, like, Google don't own the internet, right? But they want the internet.
They act like they do.
They act like they do, but they don't. But they do want the internet to be an incredibly interesting place, helpful, entertaining, whatever interesting means to the person who's using it at the time. So things like load times, when your website loads slowly, Google go, well, that is just not, that's reflecting poorly on the internet. So we're going to, and I'll use the word, spank you for making the website less interesting, and therefore you're not going to rank well. Is that a kind of a good mindset to have? Is it like help make the internet an interesting place and Google will reward you accordingly?
Yeah, part of it. And the other part of it, too, is really thinking about the number of people who abandon ship on your website before it even loads because it's loading slowly. Anything over 2 seconds, every additional second, about 20% of people just hit that back button. And you'll never see them because they're not on your site long enough to show up in analytics. So you have no idea how many people are abandoning your website because it loads so slowly.
Well, you can look at your bounce rate, can't you?
But if the analytics never loads because your site's so slow, you'd never see it.
Yes,
Yep.
Okay. Any more tips before we get into the questions?
Oh, I think that's a good foundation for people to get started with. It's a pretty good
foundation. We've got a bit to cover. So, Mel of Chocolate Beige Designs asks, is SEO really worth the effort, or would our time and money be better spent investing in social media?
Well, only a fraction of people use social media. So you really have to think about the amount of investment you're going to have to make in social. If you have fantastic search engine presence, you're dominating your competitors, then yeah, start investing in social. But social isn't where you should start, particularly because with social, you are really at the mercy of the providers so much more than you are with Google. Google, despite all its flaws, is pretty transparent about major algorithm changes. Facebook will just take away your organic traffic in a second because they want more money. So really think about where you're spending your dollars. And if you really want to build an investment on a platform like Facebook, and then people stop using Facebook and people go away, Google really isn't going anywhere anytime soon, I don't think. So, next week, right, I'll be proven wrong. But certainly, spend that investment into Google. And if everything is fantastic and you feel like you're done with Google, you got diminishing returns, it's time for you to turn to another channel, go into social. But I don't think that's where you should start.
It's amazing how many small business owners put so much faith and reliance on social media. I mean, I guess because it's free, and I guess because it's talked about and they're using it personally all the time. I think too many of them see it as a silver bullet.
Well, and they're perceived as free, but it's still your time one way or the other. Yep, your time is money.
True. Jessica Foley, don't know what her business is, but she says, how can we best use blogging for SEO purposes?
Yeah, communicate your knowledge and tell people what you do. I find the best blog posts are based on conversations that you have with customers. So, for example, one of the questions in here, I could write a blog post about this, if I write, but it doesn't have to be a written blog post as well. You could also do a video. And Moz, the website company that I mentioned earlier, who does a lot of search engine optimization, they have the tool for search engine optimization. They have a great series called Whiteboard Friday. Every Friday, they post a video, and they have a transcript of the video. That ranks very well. So if you don't have to write, you can also just talk into the camera for 10 minutes and then get a transcription service to turn that into a blog post for you. And that's been really successful for some of our clients as well.
Is having a blog and keeping it up to date on your website, Dana, kind of mission critical in Google's eyes?
I think it depends. You do want to have your website updated pretty regularly. And if you are going to commit to a blog, please update it. There's nothing worse than going on a website and seeing your last blog post was 2015. It just shows that you've given up on it and it makes your business look stale.
Looks terrible.
So you do have to keep it updated. But also think about whether or not a blog is the right thing for what you do. So, for example, we're working with a moving company. And for them, we said, you know what? People aren't really excited about a moving blog, but moving resources, that's what they get excited about. So technically, they're writing blog posts, but really they're actually posted as resources. So the name itself doesn't matter. The fact that you're providing lots of updated information for people to search and be engaged with you, that's the important thing.
How often should you update your website, and what do we mean by update? What's considered a good update?
Making sure that the information on there is correct. Let's start there. Particularly things like holidays. Sometimes I'll find you go on a website in February and it says Christmas deals. Like, ooh, you probably should have changed that.
Well, they're getting it early for next year.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Shop now for Christmas 2017. So make sure you've got that information updated pretty regularly. And I would say at least once a year, sit down, go through all the pages on your website, take a day, have a beer, figure out what needs to be updated on the site. And that's a really valuable content audit to be done regularly on your site.
That seems to be a long time between drinks, excuse the pun. Once a year?
Well, don't just have a beer once a year, but make sure to do a thorough review of your website at least once a year.
What about updating once a week with a new blog post or a podcast episode or a video?
Yeah, if you have the time to devote to that, absolutely. I find that what will happen is you'll get busy and then you'll drop off the wagon because you get busy. So make sure you're creating a schedule that's sustainable for you. And when you have some downtime, write extra stuff so you can publish later. Nobody knows that a blog post you wrote 3 weeks ago is getting only published today because you had a bunch in the hopper. That's fine.
Yep, good idea. Back a few up. Emily Cowan of A Box Full of Matches asks, how do you ensure your SEO efforts bring quality clients, not a quantity of bad clients?
Yeah, you got to make sure you're ranking for the right stuff. And that means Googling the phrases that you think you should be ranking for and also asking people, what would you search for if you were looking for what I do? So if you're just getting into SEO and you've got a few clients or customers under your belt, call them and say, if you were going to search for me, what would you search for? And then Google those phrases and see if the results that come up are relevant to what you do. And if they are, those are the phrases you can start targeting for search engine optimization. You can also use a lot of keyword research tools. Moz, the company company I've mentioned a couple times already, has a great keyword research tool. There's other companies like Ahrefs and SEMrush that can be used for this as well. And Google itself has some rudimentary keyword research tools as well in their ads interface. It isn't as useful as it used to be. It doesn't tell you the volume of the phrases sometimes as well as it used to, but it certainly does tell you what kinds of things people Google.
You're listening to the award-winning Small Business Big Marketing Show, thanks to American Express, and we're talking with SEO expert Dana DiTomaso from KickPoint in Alberta, Canada. My geography's terrible, Dana. Alberta?
It's north. Yes,
north.
Alberta.
It's up there. Now,
it's up there. It's going to snow. It's snowing right now.
Oh, is
Canada,
it? I'm sorry to hear that. It's 32 degrees Celsius where I am. So,
yeah, I don't need to hear that. Thanks.
Jason Naylor of We Do Photography asks, how do we use, it's a bit of a geeky question, this one, Dana, how do we use schema, in brackets, rich markup on our website, and what's the best use of it, especially for a photographer? And he says, and I had to Google what this meant, is it listicles, is it reviews, or is it something else? Now, listicles, I can confirm, is a short form of writing that uses a list as its thematic structure, but is fleshed out with sufficient copy to be published as an article. So that's very, very geeky, Jason. Dana, can you answer that question simply?
Yes, you should be using schema. Everybody should be using schema.
What's schema?
And the reason why, they're little pieces of code that surround items on your site to explain to Google, this is what this is. So, for example, an address can use local business markup to show to Google, this is the address, this is the city, this is the state, this is the postcode. And then Google knows that all these pieces are matching that, because they can't really tell a lot of the time, especially because people write addresses in really different ways. So, for example, in Canada, our postal codes are things like T5B 1L9, for example, and people will put a space in between the three, and sometimes they won't, and so Google doesn't really know what to do with it. In Edmonton, we have a grid system for addresses, and so people will put dashes in weird spots to separate the numbers. It's really hard for Google to understand. So by using schema, you can show Google what the address actually is, and then they can use that kind of information. And because they appreciate the effort that you put in to put in schema, websites that use schema markup are more likely to show up in search results. Google, of course, will say it's not a ranking factor, but if more sites are showing up that use schema, then it's probably a ranking factor. I would recommend using it.
What does the business owner do who just said, that sounds like good advice, but I have no idea what to do? Do they then ring their...
That's super nerdy. Yeah. So if you're using a WordPress website and you're using the Yoast SEO plugin, that's YOAST SEO plugin, this will do it for you. So definitely get that installed. If you're using something like Squarespace, you might have to use something else. So an important thing to do for your website is get it registered with Google Search Console. And that is a diagnostic tool where Google will email you if it finds something wrong with your website. Really important to have that. Once you have your website authorized in Google Search Console, in there is a section called Website Highlighter. And you can actually highlight fields on your site and say, this is my address, for example. And that way Google will apply the schema for you and you don't have to do it yourself. Wow.
Sort of went cross-eyed then, but sort of got what you're putting down, picking up what you're putting down.
Excellent. And for a photographer specifically, so going back to Jason's question, I would say there is photo markup. I would say definitely make sure to use that. And if you have an office, use local business markup. And then check out a few other competitor websites that are ranking better than you. Google has a schema tester, and you can run their websites through that and see if they have markup. And if they do, make sure you use that as well.
I'll have to get links to all these things before we finish up, but I'll put them in the show notes. Google will appreciate that. Luke Crescents of Icy Print says, why do so many SEO companies promise results and deliver nothing? Fairly
worst part of my field.
Yeah. Look, it is a bit of a dirty word. I mean, you hear some terrible stories from business owners that have spent money hand over fist and got nothing for it. So what do you say to that?
Honestly, the problem is the barrier to entry for our field is essentially a computer internet connection. That's the problem. So anybody can say they're an SEO expert. And I find that the best SEO experts are the ones that don't provide you with guarantees. No SEO expert worth their salt is going to say, I can promise you #1 rankings on Google. It's not something we say. So of course, what happens is you want that promise, you want that guarantee your money's going to pay off. And so you end up giving your money to the charlatan who says, I can promise you #1 rankings on Google. Google when they can't. And then they've got your money and then they go off into the night. Thanks so much. Here's another business owner who's willing to cough up their money. So that's part of it. So if your SEO person seems supremely confident, that might actually be a warning sign. The best SEO experts understand the limitations and will tell you this is not easy. This is a lot of work. It's not like we push a button and things happen. And what I find that people really underestimate is the amount of work that you as the client need to put in, because we don't know everything about your business. You're the expert. We're going to have to ask you a lot of questions. We're going to have to ask you to do stuff like get photos taken. And a lot of clients say, well, I'm just giving you money, make stuff happen. That's not how this works. So I think honestly that if you are just tossing money into a marketing box and you think marketing's coming out the other end, it probably isn't.
Got a couple more questions around this area of selecting an SEO expert. Marie Harris of People Empowered asks, what do I look for when choosing an SEO expert?
References, absolutely. Talk to people. Some people will say to me, oh, well, how many clients do you have who still work with you every month? But the thing is with some SEO, once we've done some major pieces, we really encourage our clients to do the day-to-day maintenance stuff and not have to work with us anymore, particularly if they're big enough to have an in-house team. So ideally, our rate of clients who work with us every single month is 0, because we really do want to empower people to do their own SEO over time. So that isn't necessarily a good thing to think about, but what you're looking for is transparency, and you really want someone who's worked with a company for a while and is still seeing results, or someone who's learned something as a result of the experience. And check out their rankings too. When you talk to them and say, what are the phrases you're trying to rank well for? Google them, see if that's actually coming up, and make sure that they've worked with them for longer than a few months, because absolutely basic changes can make you look great for the first 3 to 6 months, and then stuff gets hard. So make sure they've been working with a company for a while, not just a short period of time.
Kirralie Smout of Developing Minds, you might have answered this. Let's see. How do you find an expert who will work by the hour and be prepared to teach you rather than complex packages which tie you up with commissions and then they own all the adverts, etc., etc., etc.?
I think a lot of this is getting a good reference from somewhere. So there's a company called Get Credo, and they will refer you to fantastic SEO experts. We're actually not in their directory because we're kind of busy, but it is a place where we did used to list ourselves once upon a time. A friend of mine, John Doherty, runs that, and he vets everyone who's in that directory. So you're getting good people. And if you have a bad experience, you can complain to John. He kicks them out. So it's totally worthwhile. And then, of course, Moz has a recommended list for both general SEO, and then Moz Local has a separate list for local SEO experts, and we're on both those lists.
Okay, just explain those two things. So if I'm the local restaurant, I want a local SEO expert, right? Versus if I'm an e-commerce store selling to the world, I want a non-local SEO expert.
That's right. And local is a really specific discipline. There's only, I would say, maybe 20 of us who are extremely skilled in this in the world. So you want to try to get the experts at it.
Wow. I did not realize that. It's that specific a skill set.
That specific a skill set, yeah. And there's actually a conference, Local U. Right now it's only in the U.S. The next one's in Santa Monica if you want to go for a trip in January. But I do recommend following the Local U people if you want to learn more about local SEO. And they tweet out lots of great informative articles.
Local as in Y-O-U?
Local as in just the letter U, as in local university.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow, 20 people in the world who are absolutely proficient in. So if I am a restaurant and I can't afford one of those 20 people who are local SEO experts, what are what have I got to do?
Learn yourself, honestly. But frankly, for local SEO, a lot of these people are really affordable. I can certainly refer to a whole bunch of people, because the great thing about local SEO is once the basics are handled, you don't necessarily need to do stuff with a SEO consultant every month forever. Because there is in local SEO, there's a lot of foundational pieces, but then the ongoing stuff are things that you can learn how to do and don't take up a whole bunch of your time. So things like Google Posts, for example, that I mentioned, that's only 5 minutes a couple times a week. That's something that has a huge impact but is not very time consuming. So definitely talk to some of those experts on that list and see what you can get for a quote. The good ones do not charge a lot. They get it done and they're good at what they do.
Sam Hempel of Meum.com asks, what constitutes duplicate content? Do you want to explain what is duplicate content and why it's a bad thing?
So duplicate content happens if you have a page in your website that has content, and then you have another page in your website that has exactly the same content. Or if you've taken an article and asked for it to be republished elsewhere, so now you have the same content on your website and someone else's website. Duplicate content used to be a big scare tactic because anything that was duplicate, Google wasn't going to rank, and it was a huge problem. But what I often find is what ends up happening are things like bad redirects. So let's say, for example, your website is www.yourcompany.com.au. Well, what if you have the non-www version? So it's just yourcompany.com.au. If I go to both of those, do they both give me your homepage, or does one redirect to the other? So does the www redirect to the non, or vice versa? And if it doesn't, then you end up in a situation where you have two versions of your website, as far as Google's concerned, all with exactly the same content. That's very bad. So that can be a duplicate content problem.
You don't want to do that. Again, going back to, hey, Google wanting the internet to be interesting, not very interesting if there's, 20 websites with the same content on each website.
Well, and then they can't decide what to rank, right?
Correct.
And I mean, Google's smart, but it's also kind of dumb. You really do need to take it by the hand and say, here's the pages, rank these. You don't want to make it complex for them.
Here's a money-making tip from American Express member and Four Pillars Gin founder, Stu Gregor.
I, for the life of me, don't understand why a business won't accept Amex, because what you're potentially doing is knocking back customers who want to spend money on your product or your brand or your service or whatever it is. And I frankly don't understand it. If someone wants to give me their Amex and buy 10 bottles of gin, I tell you what, I'll take their Amex, thanks very much. You're potentially also denying yourself a big chunk of corporate business as well. Because a lot of sales guys, a lot of guys, I know me, in my own business, I use Amex. And if I go to, if I ring to make a booking at a restaurant or a bar or something, I say, do you accept Amex? And they say no, I go somewhere else. So they don't even know the business they're missing out on. It beggars belief. And I often find myself having these rather awkward conversations at the with a shopkeeper or a bar owner or a restaurateur saying, why wouldn't you take it? I'll pay you the extra. I'll pay 1.5, the credit card service fee or whatever you want. Take my money.
It's Business 101, really. Make it easy for people to give you money. Speaking of money, the American Express Business Explorer credit card comes with 50,000 bonus points every year, a low interest rate, and 2 points on every dollar you spend. Not to mention a couple of tickets to the very swish Amex Lounge at Sydney International Airport. Search Amex Business to find out more. New American Express card members only. Terms and conditions apply.
Arne Betteridge of signatureclothing.com.au asks, would love your guest to give a list of the ranking factors they see as important. We've started that. Do you want to add to it what you've already shared?
I'm actually going to refer to two studies that I've participated in that are actually coming out. One of them is a local ranking factor survey, and this is a survey of the 20 or so local experts about what they think is important for local search, and that's coming out very soon. It'll be on Moz. And they also do a yearly ranking factor survey of thousands of experts in our field for general SEO. So I would say look at both of those, because me going through that list would take up a lot of time on the program. So there's a lot of different factors out there.
So look out on the local ranking factor survey on Moz. The other one, is that out yet?
That's on Moz as well, yeah. And okay. I can give you both those links for the show notes.
Great, lovely. Now, what are the main ways Google displays search results? This is a question coming from me. I was at a conference about 6 months ago, and the SEO speaker talked a lot about all the different ways Google displays search results. Featured snippets, product listing results, image carousels, answer boxes. Gosh, how do we tackle that, Dana? Do you want to go through the major ones and talk about how you can potentially be ranked for the way Google displays?
Yeah, so this is part of what I was talking about when you Google your keywords and see what comes up. Part of what you want to look at are what are they called, those search features, or SERP features. And SERP is SERP, that stands for Search Engine Result Page. It's another nerdy acronym we came up with. But when you're looking at things like SERP features, you want to think about what kind of feature is lending some interest to this result. As you said, Google wants to keep it interesting. So if you're Googling things like buy Nike shoes, maybe it'll show you some product listing results, but maybe it'll show show you a map as well if there's a Nike store near you. Image carousels often come up for things like travel or things to do this weekend. Answer boxes if you Google things like how to cook a turkey. Those are really rich single results which can point you to a very specific website. So those are the major features, and I find that they really depend, and maps is also a really important feature, and it really does depend on the type of query and the intent of the query. And you could say things like buy Nike shoes, and you might get a product listing ad. You can say buy Nike shoes near me, that's gone, and now you have a map. So really changing just a couple of words in your search phrase really changes the intent, and the intent is what determines what type of search result you're going to get.
We're chatting with SEO aficionado Dana DiTomaso from KickPoint. Dana, Anna Smith of Salaya Designs asks, what can a small business do from an SEO standpoint when faced with competition from multi-billion-dollar companies with huge SEO budgets?
Yeah, sometimes you need to say, you know what, you win, and then you find another venue to try. You don't want to go head on with books, right? Amazon's going to win that. But you can specialize in a specific niche, or you can look at doing things like, as I mentioned, sponsorships. Spend your money getting your name out in the community, doing other stuff other than the search engine optimization. Because sometimes, you can't beat the competition. There's too many people. It's very crowded. Photographer is another example where it can be extremely crowded, very difficult to stand out. So you want to specialize in a certain niche or build relationships with people who are going to mention you. Because in addition to Google, people do actually read blog posts on other websites. And if those blog posts talk about you, then they might find your website through that. So really do consider different ways you can get the word out. So for example, our newsletter that we have built, we're not necessarily going to rank number one for SEO. We don't really want to, but we have lots of subscribers to our newsletter every week. And eventually some of them come around to us for business.
That whole, I love the fact that SEO can sort of force a business to niche down because, if you are a photographer or a designer or a copywriter, they're a dime a dozen, right? There's no shortage of really anyone in any category. We live in a world of parity. So what is going to separate you is when you do niche down. It takes courage to niche, but clearly it's going to help your SEO. If you're a designer for the accounting industry, there's a niche. Probably a bit of work there too, actually, looking at accountants' websites. But yeah, I like that. And Google clearly, it makes Google's life easier to help identify what you do and how to rank you, right?
Absolutely.
Matthew White of ErgoFlex asks, forgetting one moment about the specifics of SEO, how much, this is a bit of a how long's a piece of string question, how much money should you really pay an agency or person each month?
I think you need to sit down and figure out what your return on investment needs to be. So how much money can you afford to spend on marketing? A good guideline can be 4 to 10% of your gross revenue. So can you afford to spend that much to an agency? And really think about the kind of results you're getting from that agency. And one thing that the bad agencies are really bad at is proving results. So make sure you're getting a report that makes sense. And I don't want reports that just talk about how much traffic you got, because last time I checked, traffic does not actually pay the bills. Make sure you're getting a report that shows you the actual business you're getting. We had a horrifying experience with one client who's working with us now, and their previous agency counted every time somebody looked at a page for one of their locations as a conversion. Wow. That doesn't mean they called or filled out the form. It just means they looked at the page. And so they looked amazing, but they didn't understand why they weren't getting that much actual cash money. Once we fixed that up, their conversion rate dropped by something like 90%, but now it was actually accurate, and they could tell what was bringing them business and what wasn't. So make sure you're getting accurate reporting is such a big deal. And I find that agencies are really terrible at reporting, unfortunately.
So really, to Matthew's question, figure out what the return on investment is going to be. And if for every dollar you spend with an SEO company, you're going to get 2 back, then find lots of dollars to spend with them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There's diminishing returns at some point, but you do have to invest at the beginning. Just make sure the return is going to be there. And the return isn't going to be there immediately. I find that it takes at least 3 to 6 months at a minimum before you start seeing returns from SEO. So that can be where things like AdWords, because we do a lot of AdWords work as well. AdWords can be, or Google Ads is what it's called now, can be a really nice stopgap while you're trying to rank better.
Okay. Farina Cheng, she's in jewellery. Now, she says a bit of a long one here. I've written an article that brings organic traffic to my website. However, it's on a very generic topic, the difference between 9 carat and 18 carat gold. Rather than appealing to my specific audience, people who want untraditional custom jewellery. It's one of the top most visited pages on my website. However, people bounce off the page without exploring further once they have the info. I'd like to be able to replicate that, but for a topic that will actually make them want to explore my site further. What's the best way to find topics to cover that will actually lead to people taking valuable action on my website?
I would start talking to your customers and seeing what kinds of questions they had and what kind of research they did before they chose you. And that is what you should be writing about. And I wouldn't necessarily get rid of that article. I mean, you can keep that on there. You never know, honestly, if someone's going to attract you and it is relevant to what you do. So I wouldn't get rid of it, but certainly start talking to your customers and seeing what research they did, and ask them even to look at their search history and send you screenshots of the kind of stuff that they Googled before they chose you. And those are great foundations for what you can write about.
One of the things that Farina could do, I'm guessing too, Dana, is that within that article that's getting all the traffic, she should be linking to other articles within her website so that you're holding people longer. I think a lot of business owners forget that, linking between pages of your website is a way of holding people there.
Oh, yeah, all the time. People don't link within website pages enough. And there's also two additional things, too, that I want to address. A lot of people think that the home page is the most visited page on your website. If you're doing a good job on SEO, it should actually be one of the lower pages that people visit. They should be starting elsewhere on your site. So go to your site with fresh eyes, look at that page. Is that the best first experience that someone could be having with your site? And if it isn't, work on it until it is. And then the other half of this is Google Analytics. A lot of people don't understand that in Google Analytics, there's a metric in there, time on page. And people think that, for example, if I land on this blog post and then I read it and it takes me 2 minutes and then I leave, it'll say the time on page was 2 minutes for me. That's not true. Google can only record time on page if I visit a second page on your site. So people could be spending 10 minutes on that page, really absorbing the content, maybe bookmarking you to come back later. But because they didn't visit a second page on your site, it doesn't actually record time on page. There's ways to fix this using stuff like Google Tag Manager. It's pretty technical, but this is something you can talk to a marketer about to help fix that up for you.
How does Google know? Like if I go to a website and then I go to another page, a second page on that website, Google's timing how long I'm spending there. What if I go and get a coffee? In fact, have that website open on a tab for the next 24 hours?
Yeah, so Google will time out your session after a period of time. There's a default set in Google Analytics, but you can always change that. And so what ends up happening is when you come back again, because, people who leave tabs open all the time, we call them tab hoarders, right? So every time you visit that tab again, it's opening up a new session. And so what you might find is that people will visit maybe 6-8 times before they convert. And that means that your conversion rate looks quite bad, but it isn't sessions that convert, it's users. So even if the same person is coming, I would rather have that person convert 100% of the time. I don't care how many times they have to come to my site before they buy my stuff. So really think about your user conversion rate, not just your session conversion rate. And in Google Analytics, it is your session conversion rate they report on.
Julie Ryburn of MoneyQuest, I think we've answered her question, but maybe you've got something to add, Dana. She asks, how often should content be updated to assist in Google rankings, and does the quality of images have an impact? I think we have covered that.
Yeah, I think so.
Nikki Grummett of GFence asks, I have a web developer on my team. What do I ask
for her.
Yeah, absolutely. What do I ask them to do? And how do I know it's working? Gee, she's kind of put the cart ahead of the horse there.
Well, I honestly, I find this a lot where there's in-house developers, but they don't know where to start. Tell them to start Googling technical SEO. That's the part that they're going to have the most impact on, and start looking at their site and seeing what they can do to improve their technical SEO. And this is where you can look at things like site speed. This is where your developer can really shine and make your site load incredibly fast. So those are the things they should focus on.
Yeah, good point. Good on Nikki for having someone on a team like that. I mean, I'm amazed at how many, business owners, and it depends on the size of the business and cash flow and all that, but not having an SEO expert or web developer or a copywriter. Most businesses have got a designer on their team, right? Whether it be full-time or at arm's length where they can call upon. But having these other people is kind of mission critical if you want to really nail your marketing.
Yeah, I mean, you think about hiring a bookkeeper, but you don't think about hiring a copywriter, just as important.
Yes, and much more interesting. Hello to all you bookkeepers. Sean Gannon of Lamosia asks, are there any go-to websites to get easy backlinks for our content to start to get backlink traction? So, Dana, can you explain the importance of a backlink, what it is, and then answer Sean's question?
Yeah, so going back to the beginning when I talked about experience, authority, and trust, the more sites that link to you, the more authority that you have. But it isn't necessarily a quantity over quality thing. I can have 100 links from really terrible websites that also link to sites for Viagra and casino and sportsbook betting, and those links don't count for anything. And I can have 5 links from really high quality media sources, and those are links that are going to matter. So the sad thing is that the easy links are the bad links. So don't bother with the easy links. What you can do, though, and I think a lot of people don't do this, is go through your Rolodex. I'm showing my age by saying Rolodex. Go through your LinkedIn and look at your business contacts. Can they link to you? Is there something that you can write about that's relevant to what they do, and then they can link to your website? I think a lot of people underuse the business contacts that they have. And particularly, again, if you're in a local area or you're in a niche business, why would you not ask somebody who's in an industry related to yours to link to your website? And that's a really easy link because you're already friends with them. Who wouldn't want to link to their friend?
I probably get 10 emails a day from people all over the world wanting to provide a guest post on smallbusinessbigmarketing.com. And sometimes I take them up. I used not to because the quality of the content was pretty poor, but now it's particularly good. And that's really what's happening. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that is probably someone at an SEO company identifying my website as having what I call some good Google juice. And if they can provide an article on it with a link back to their client's website, then that's a win, right?
Yeah, so a link building campaign that we did, for example, for a property management company that owns a bunch of apartment buildings across Western Canada, we reached out to moving companies and said, can we give you an article on things you should know when moving into an apartment building? And they said, yep, great, got it listed. I think we had an 80% success rate on that. It was exceptionally high for a link building campaign, and it did extremely well for their website.
Tell me about I talk about Google Juice, but there are websites that, you'll have to help me here with the terminology, but there are websites that Google deem as incredibly valuable. I don't know if that's the right word. And then there's website like a university's website or a newspaper's media website. And then there's the website advertising Viagra. How does a website get Google Juice?
I hate the phrase Google juice, but it's authority is what I try to say.
Okay, authority. Got it.
But really, it's those places are stingy with giving out links, and that's what makes them important. So if they deem your site worthy of giving you a link, it means that they find you valuable. If you give a link to everybody, Google doesn't care. If you're picky about who you give links to, then Google cares. And I think that really helps with authority. So for example, getting a link from the New York Times, best link you can possibly get. They almost never give out those links. But when they do, it means that they are willing to donate some of their authority to you.
So, for example, the show notes for an episode of my podcast generally include a lot of links. Any resources that we've mentioned, my guest's website, a listener who sent in a question, I'll link back to them. I have a segment in my show called the Monster Prize Draw, in which I then, one of the prizes is a link on my website back to... So, you know, a typical show notes page for this podcast is pretty link heavy. Are Google looking at that and going, yuck?
No, because people are linking to you and your site has authority. So really, you're granting these other places authority. And because the links are topical, you have a topic for the podcast and all the links that you're providing are related to that topic. It isn't just a free-for-all. It's clearly on a theme. So it's definitely valuable. Okay.
Is a link on a social media platform considered a backlink?
No, it isn't.
Because it's behind a password?
Well, no, because it's anyone can get a link. Again, it's that value of the link, right? Anyone can sign up for a Facebook page.
Yeah, true. Dan French of French Enviro asks, how do we use SEO and keywords to best test ideas and offers?
I actually prefer using something like Google Ads for testing ideas and offers because you can get data back a lot more quickly and you can get more concrete data. SEO can be kind of, fluffy where you don't necessarily know where you're ranking or what people were thinking or what they were Googling. But when it comes to ads, you'll know exactly what people were Googling and what they clicked on and, how long they spent on your site and that sort of thing. So definitely put your testing into ads. Don't necessarily put it into SEO, but then take your best performing work from ads and invest that into SEO.
Whew, I think we'll have a break right about now. How's the information overload going? A lot of content there, right? Don't stress, though, because you can download the full transcription of this episode over at smallbusinessbigmarketing.com/438, so you can scribble all over it. And the other good news is that this is only part one of my chat with SEO genius Dana DiTomaso of KickPoint.co. Next week, we will do it all again. Part 2 is coming up, thanks to our supporting partners at American Express. If we haven't answered your question in this episode or covered an SEO topic that you was hoping we would cover, don't worry, it'll be probably covered in Part 2 next week. Again, smallbusinessbigmarketing.com/438 is where you can grab the transcription to this episode and leave a comment in the show notes. Well, that almost wraps up another episode of the award-winning Small Business Big Marketing Show. What award, you ask? Well, it was awarded the Best Business Podcast for 2018 at the Australian Podcast Awards earlier this year. Hey, don't forget there's an entire back catalogue of interviews over at smallbusinessbigmarketing.com. If you love the show, then let another business owner know about it by grabbing their phone and downloading it for them. Until next week, Part 2 of SEO strategies for 2019. I'm Timbo Reid, always have been, always will be. Thanks for tuning in. May your marketing be the best marketing. Bye for now.